In 1996, a group of researchers at MIT asked a room full of MBA students to write down the last 2 digits of their Social Security number. Just 2 digits, nothing to do with money. Then they showed the students a bottle of wine, a cordless keyboard, a box of Belgian chocolates, and they asked, "Would you pay that amount, in dollars, for this item? And then, what's the most you'd actually pay?" Students whose numbers ended in 54 or higher paid, on average, more than twice as much for the same items as students whose numbers ended in 11 or below. 2 random digits from a government ID that had nothing to do with shopping, nothing to do with value, had just quietly reached inside their minds and moved the ceiling of what they thought things were worth. These were MBA students, future executives, people trained to evaluate value rationally, and they had no idea it happened. This is called anchoring, and once you understand what it does to you, you will never look at a price tag, or a negotiation, or a sale, or a restaurant menu the same way again. The experiment I just described was run by Dan Ariely, a behavioral economist then at MIT's Sloan School of Management, along with his colleagues Drazen Prelek and George Lowenstein. It was published in 2003 in the Quarterly Journal of Economics under the title Coherent Arbitrariness. That phrase is worth pausing on. Coherent arbitrariness. The prices people chose weren't random. They were internally consistent. They made sense to the person who chose them. They just happened to be anchored to a number that had no logical relationship to value whatsoever. Ariely came to behavioral economics from an unusual place. After surviving severe burns as a teenager in Israel, he spent years in hospitals observing how doctors made decisions about painful procedures and noticed that the way a treatment was framed, the sequence it was introduced in, the comparison point offered, changed how patients experienced pain itself. He became obsessed with a single question. When we make decisions, including decisions about money, are we actually reasoning? Or are we just responding to the frame we were handed? Anchoring was his answer, or rather, one of his most disturbing answers. Here is what anchoring does at its most basic level. Your brain, when it encounters an unfamiliar price, does not generate an assessment of value from scratch. It doesn't weigh manufacturing costs, scarcity, your genuine need, comparable products. It looks for a nearby number, any number, and uses that as a starting point. Then it adjusts, and the adjustment is almost always insufficient. The anchor pulls you back. In a different experiment, Ariely asked people to listen to an annoying sound, a high-pitched screech played through headphones. He then asked, "Would you listen to that again for 50 cents? Some people said yes, some said no. Then a different group was asked, "Would you listen to it again for $5? Again, some said yes. But when he later offered both groups the same neutral price, say $1, the group that had been anchored to 50 cents consistently accepted far less compensation to endure the same discomfort. The group anchored to $5 demanded more. Same sound, same irritation, different anchor, different experience of what it was worth to suffer through it. This is not a quirk of lab conditions. Ariely's research showed that anchoring works even when people are explicitly told that the anchor is meaningless, even when they're warned, even when they try to correct for it. The mind reaches for the number anyway. The retail industry understood anchoring long before behavioral economists named it. The practice of showing a was price next to a now price, the crossed-out original, the friendly reduced figure, is pure anchoring. The original number was never designed to tell you what something is worth. It was designed to become the number your brain starts from. The discount then feels like a gift, a rescue. You're not paying less than fair value. You're paying less than the number that was placed in your head seconds ago. In 2012, a retail chain called JCPenney decided to eliminate this practice entirely. New CEO Ron Johnson, fresh from Apple, believed customers wanted honest, everyday low prices instead of the theater of fake discounts. He stripped away the was-now framing and simply labeled items with their real prices. Sales collapsed. Revenue fell 32% in a single year. Johnson was fired. JCPenney nearly went bankrupt. What Johnson had misunderstood was that customers were not responding to price. They were responding to the relationship between prices. Without an anchor, without that crossed-out number to compare against, even a genuinely good deal felt like just a price. There was no story, no rescue. And without the feeling of having beaten the anchor, people felt no pull to buy. The anchor isn't the price. The anchor is the emotion the price creates. Anchoring doesn't only live in stores, it lives in your salary negotiation. The number whoever speaks first just planted in the room. It lives in real estate. The listing price that makes every other house on the same street feel cheap or expensive by comparison. It lives in your sense of what a meal should cost, what a wedding should cost, what a car should cost, all of it calibrated to whatever number you encountered first, in whatever context you encountered it. Ariely described a particular version of this he called arbitrary coherence. Once an anchor is established, even an absurd one, your subsequent choices align around it with an internal logic that feels completely natural. You feel like you're reasoning. You feel like you're comparing. You're really just constructing a story that starts from the number you were handed. This is the mechanism. The price trick your brain falls for every time isn't really a trick at all. It's your brain's way of reducing an impossible cognitive burden. Assigning value to things genuinely from first principles is extraordinarily hard. So your brain outsources the starting point. It grabs whatever number is nearby and available, and it builds from there, efficiently, automatically, invisibly. The technical name in the psychology literature is the anchoring and adjustment heuristic, first described by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in 1974. But the version Ariely documented, where the anchor doesn't just influence but essentially installs a price in the mind, he called coherent arbitrariness. Your choices are coherent. Your reasoning feels sound. The starting point was arbitrary. We tend to describe this as gullibility, as being bad with money, as falling for marketing tricks like someone who should know better. But that framing gets the mechanism exactly wrong. The psychologists who study anchoring are not describing stupidity, they're describing architecture. Kahneman himself wrote in Thinking, Fast and Slow that anchoring effects are among the most robust findings in all of psychology, and the people most susceptible to them are not the least educated or the least financially literate. In some studies, experts in a field are just as anchored as novices, sometimes more so, because expertise gives people more material to construct a coherent story around an arbitrary starting point. The brain that reaches for an anchor is the brain doing its job. In a world with limited information and unlimited choices, you need heuristics. You need shortcuts. You cannot reason from first principles every time you pick up a bottle of wine. The problem is not that you use anchors. The problem is that you're living in an economy that was explicitly designed to hand you anchors and then to profit from where you land. Think about the last time you felt like you got a good deal. What made it feel good? Was it that the price was low in some absolute sense? Lower than the cost of production? Lower than you'd pay anywhere else? Or was it that the price was lower than the number you saw first? Think about the last time you felt overcharged. Was the price genuinely unreasonable? Or had the menu, the brochure, the comparison website already placed a different number in your head, and this one failed to feel like a rescue from it? Your wallet is navigating a world full of numbers placed there deliberately. The salary range posted first in a job listing. The retail value listed before the offer price. The table of 3 subscription tiers where the middle one always looks most sensible. The original price that appears for 3 seconds before the sale price loads. None of these numbers were placed there to inform you. They were placed there because whoever placed them understands, even if only instinctively, what Ariely's MBA students discovered in 1996: the first number wins. Not because it's right, but because it arrives first. And here is the strangest part. Knowing this changes your awareness. It does not, according to the research, reliably change your behavior. Ariely warned his own students about anchoring, showed them the studies, explained the mechanism, had them identify it in real time, and then watched them get anchored in the very exercises he designed to demonstrate it. The mind reaches for the nearest number because that is what it does. What we're left with is something harder than a correction. It's a reckoning with what deciding actually means. When the frame arrives before the decision does, and the number that was handed to you feels, by the time you see the price tag, like it came from inside your own head.